Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin this meeting, I ask that everybody silence your cell phones, please. Before the meeting begins, I'm going to ask again to be sure and silence your phones. Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustee meeting is an open meeting for the public to observe the board conducting district business. Therefore, audience members may address the board during the designated audience items section on the agenda. If you have any printed materials you want to give to the board members, you must provide them to the board secretary, Jane Kaiser, or to me, and we will provide them to the board. We also ask the members of the audience be respectful of others, remain quiet during the meeting so that everyone's able to hear the proceedings. For your convenience, microphones have been provided on both sides of the boardroom. Please speak directly into the microphone if you're asked to answer a question or address the board during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Ontiveros. The time is 6:02 p.m. and this meeting is hereby called to order. We have the presence of a quorum and the meeting has been duly called and notice of the meeting has been posted for the time and manner required by law. I would like to ask the audience to stand with us as we do the pledges of allegiance and remain standing for a silent invocation.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Please remain standing for a silent invocation, and we'd also like to have a moment of silence in recognition of those who lost their lives in Florida and all of those who were affected. Thank you. You may be seated. First up are our recognitions. Dr. Dupree.
Yes, Madam President, if the board would join me in front of the dais, we will shake hands and congratulate our many students who are here to be recognized this evening.
Madam President, Dr. Dupree, members of the board, let's give a big round of applause to our two outstanding Colony Bend Elementary School students. We have Miss Carmen Bevins and Cheyenne Ali. Carmen is our student council secretary, a member of the Safety Patrol, the running club, choir, and she plays softball. And Mr. Ali is a member of the Safety Patrol, the Running Club, Coding Club, Choir, and participates in Cub Scouts Pack 797. Congratulations, Colony Bend Elementary School. Thank you for being here this evening. Now we move on to some outstanding musical performers that we'd like to recognize this evening. We have 43 students who performed at the Texas Music Educators Convention recently. They were selected by participating in a series of rigorous auditions. The final selection to All-State puts these musicians in the top 2% of all students who auditioned from across the state. So we have a great group of kids this evening. We're going to recognize them school by school and with their directors. So we'll start with Austin High School, their band, school band. We have student Christopher Courtney. Supporting him is director Ryan Dimkovich, assistant director Logan Nagai, and percussion specialist Andres Aya. Representing Austin High School Orchestra, we have Jonathan Chang. Yvette Chang, Daniel Ching, Mr. Derek Jiang, Paul Lee, Mr. Ken Xiao, and supporting these amazing students is Director Ann Victor, Assistant Director Zoran Yazmek. Thank you for being here this evening and representing Austin High School. Let's give Austin High School a big round of applause. Next, we have representatives from Clements High School. We're going to start with the band, Jason Anchetta. Mr. Kevin Chow. Ben Kelly. Mr. Kyle Pittman. David Chiazone. Mr. Daniel Reyes. Also, we have Mr. Seth Upthegrove. Seth? Larry Shue. And supporting our students, Director Daniel Galloway, Assistant Director Jeff Johnson, Assistant Director Leslie Collins, and Percussion Specialist Brian Waits. We're going to go back to Austin Choir. We've got Representative Melinda Nutalapati and Director Adrian Rodriguez. Thank you, Melinda. Next, we're going to move on to Clements High School Orchestra. We have Neo Scott here this evening. Mr. Jonathan Wing. Mr. Gregory Young. And supporting our students at Clements High School with orchestra is Director Ginger Wolf. Ms. Wolf. I'd also like to recognize our high school, Clements High School Choir. They couldn't be here this evening, but let's give them a round of applause. Clements High School Choir. Moving on now to Dulles High School Band, we have student Mr. Andrew Fissler. In supporting the band, we have Director Joe Pruitt, Assistant Director Arnell Dayrich, and Assistant Director Spencer Clayton. Now from the Dulles High School Jazz Band, we have Mr. Thomas Johnson. He wasn't able to join us this evening, but a big round of applause for him. Moving on to the Dulles High School Orchestra, we have Amar Hafar. Miss Phoebe Tan. And supporting our students this evening is Mr. Michael Isidore, our director. Now we move on to Dulles High School Choir. We have Miss Julianne Charakara, Swera Mukamala. And supporting our choir students from Dulles High School, Director Ms. Jennifer Marrero. Congratulations, a big round of applause to our fine arts students at Dulles High School. Moving on to Elkins High School, our band, Mr. Tim George. Miss Reba George. Director Chad Collins, Assistant Director Joseph Chin, and Percussion Specialist Arif Bouyan. Elkins High School Choir, we have Miss Faith Epen and Director John Richardson. Big round of applause for Elkins. Congratulations, Elkins High School. From Rich Point High School Band, we have Alonzo Barrett. Mr. Brandon Benson. Director Luis Saldana. Assistant Director Greg Davis. And Percussion Specialist Dustin Stamer. From Rich Point High School Choir, we have Sam Jenkins. Mr. Dan Lewis. Miss Hannah Schmitz. Director Matthew Coffey. And Assistant Director Salil Manan. Congratulations to Ridge Point High School. From Travis High School Orchestra, we have Robert Gonzalez. Mr. Kevin Hulipas. And Director Sabrina Behrens. This rounds out our 43 outstanding student musicians who were selected to compete in the All-State Band. Congratulations. Next, we have an amazing group of students from Settlers Way Elementary and Quail Valley Middle School. They were named finalists in the Student Spacecraft Experiment Program for their proposals that will travel to space by space shuttle to the International Space Station, and their experiments will be run by astronauts, so we're very excited for their work. From Settlers Way Elementary, first we're going to start with Isabel Chang. Isabel? Lin Tan Nu. Ting Yu Wendy Wu. And their teacher facilitator, Ms. Sherry DeMont from Settlers Way Elementary. Congratulations. We're going to move on now to Quail Valley Middle School. We're very excited about their proposal as well. Can we have Miss Chloe Spence? Lena Joshi. Miss Alfulia Nair. Christina Fong. Michelle Zhu. Viraj Nagandi. Neil Namaganda. Mr. Joshua Peter. Rochelle Shaw. Mr. Bhargav Vida. And our teacher facilitator, Jeanette Morales and Elizabeth Fox. Congratulations to Quail Valley Middle School. What an honor for our students to have their work recognized like this. Next, we're going to move on to Jan Schiff Elementary, who won the 2018 Fittest School Challenge hosted by USA Fit Marathon. The campus participated in the USA Fit 5K. Many of our students placed. The school was awarded $250 for being top in the school. So congratulations to Schiff. Representing them this evening is our principal, it's Principal DeFlora. Good work by Schiff Elementary. That concludes our recognition for this evening.
Not yet, not yet. The board has a recognition this evening. Am I on? Can everyone hear me? Okay. She's not going to be too happy that I'm doing this, but the board would like to recognize our assistant, Jane Kaiser, who is going to be retiring after many years of service in Fort Bend ISD, 17 years total and 6 years as assistant to the Board of Trustees. And we could not let this moment go by without having something to say about her, because she is more than just a Fort Bend ISD employee and more than just the board assistant. She takes care of us. She sees to it that we have all the information we need. She sees to it that we have water at our spots and every piece of information that we need before every workshop and every board meeting. She tells us where we are going, when we need to be there, and if we drop the ball, she's there to pick it up. She listens to us, laughs with us, and cries with us, and she is truly someone with a servant's heart. She puts everyone around her first and herself last always. So it seems like the words thank you are insufficient, but to say exactly how we feel, but we do want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and to let you know that we will miss you and we appreciate your service. Thank you. Okay, next up we have audience items this evening. First up will be, is it Yen Rabe? Okay. You can come to the microphone right here. Our board secretary, Ms. Helliger, will keep time for you. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and she'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good evening. My name is Yen Rabe. I'm the Houston area chapter leader for the national nonprofit organization Start School Later, with over 100 chapters nationwide. We are volunteers dedicated to increasing public awareness about the relationship between sleep and school hours, and to ensuring school start times are compatible with students' health, safety, and equity in education. I am also a high school educator, and I see firsthand the effects of chronic teen sleep deprivation. Houston area school districts are increasingly becoming aware of the benefits of starting school later and are making the change. As you may know, HISD and Goose Creek Consolidated ISD have recently announced that they will start high schools later for the next school year. Deer Park, Texas City, and Friendswood ISDs already start high school at 8:30 or later. Dallas ISD high schools start at 9 a.m. and 9:15 a.m. How about Fort Bend ISD? Teenagers need a recommended 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep. The implication for starting school at 7:30 a.m. means students will just have to go to sleep by 8 or 9 p.m. in order to wake up well rested. How many teenagers do you know go to sleep at 8 or 9 p.m.? Some sports activities and fine arts programs end around that time. Many students have homework keeping them up late. In addition, teens are biologically predisposed to go to sleep at around 11 p.m. or later. When students do not get enough sleep, some unintended consequences are increased chance of sports injuries, increased risk of heart disease, increased depression, increased suicidal ideation, increased substance abuse, increased school violence, and reduced academic performance. Many high school students, even though sleep deprived, prefer the early start time because they like to get out early. Often these students do not have parental supervision during this time because their parents are still at work until much later. That can lead students to make bad decisions. National statistics indicate that 1/5 of violent juvenile crimes occur between 3 and 7 p.m. on school days. When high schools start later, students, especially those of low socioeconomic status, get more sleep and have time to eat breakfast and thus are healthier and are more ready to learn. Also, teachers are healthier and more prepared to teach. The cost-benefit ratio is 1 to 9. In conclusion, we would like to ask that the administration have the courage and the leadership to continue working on starting school later, high school later, for your students and staff. The decision of start times should be based on the priorities of what is best for students' health, safety, and equity in academics, rather than teacher and adult conveniences. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next up is Rizwana Sultana.
She's running a little late. Can she speak last?
Sure. Melanie Aberage. Sorry. I have a copy and it didn't come through very well. You'll have 3 minutes and Ms. Helliger will tell you when you have 30 seconds remaining.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm speaking in regards to the decision to forego consideration of the implementation of later start times for middle and high schoolers next year. I'm just a parent myself, so I'm going to read what I have to say. While I recognize the significance of the extracurricular activities and fine arts programs and understand the issue that childcare presents to many families, I'm deeply disappointed that the district has chosen to prioritize these two issues over the health and well-being of all of the students. I'm disappointed that the extracurricular and childcare concerns, which while valid, do not affect every family, have taken over the discussion about doing what is right to ensure the physical and mental health of each and every student in FBISD. You have the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and the CDC telling you this change is necessary. You have studies from all across the nation confirming the effects of sleep deprivation on depression, diabetes, academic performance, and attendance. With all the information available to you from these reliable sources telling you that early start times are harmful, to do nothing at this point is to choose to continue to do harm. A choice to do nothing is a choice of passive endorsement of the current situation, and in light of all the research showing what that means to our children's health, that is unacceptable to me. There are many issues that families need to address, accommodations made, flexibility required, but it can be done, and it must be done to ensure the health of the students comes first. Health before academics, health before extracurricular and fine arts, health before district involvement in child care concerns. On this issue, if the physical and mental health of each and every student does not come first, their continued suffering will be because of your inaction. You can have mental health programs and preach about the priority of health to students all you want, but unless you take action when the facts are clearly calling for your change, you will have failed them. While you've already made the choice to forego implementing the new start times for this fall, it is not too late to take action and do the right thing. Rather than dropping the subject and bringing it up again later, I respectfully request that you consider setting a firm date for implementation of the change in start times and begin making plans to meet that target date. Please make no mistake, change is necessary. Be the ones who made the change that made the difference in our children's lives. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next up, we have Mr. Jack Reynolds. Ms. Helliger will let you know when you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Good evening. I've emailed each of you regarding the shooting in Florida and what we need to do here in Fort Bend. I've heard that you have a concern that the police will be coming in if we've got concealed carry holders in the schools, and they won't know the good guys from the bad guys. Let me point out to you that concealed carry has been around throughout the country for 20 to 30 years. That same concern, while there's logic to it, should apply everywhere, not just to schools. Now, name me one time where that concern has borne fruit, where the police have rushed in and started shooting good guys because they couldn't tell them from the bad guys. You can't, because it hasn't happened. There's two reasons for that. One, mass shootings don't occur except in gun-free zones. Two, by the time the police can get there, the shooting has stopped. The concealed carry holders have finished it. They put their guns in their holsters. The real question is, are you more concerned about an imaginary concern of the police not knowing good guys from bad guys, or are you more concerned about the 10, 20, or maybe more students and teachers who may be killed before the police can get there? The real problem is we use incorrect terminology. The police are not the first responders. The people who are there when the shooting starts are the first responders. In Florida, Coach Feist, who's rightfully held as a hero for pushing the girl out of the way and then shielding the students, was the first responder. The police are the second responders. Our current rules allow the second responders to come in armed, but the first responders have to be unarmed. They have to be targets. Imagine how many lives could have been saved if Coach Feist had been allowed to carry concealed. Mr. Dupree has said that he cannot guarantee that no shooting will occur here in Fort Bend ISD, and he's right. There's no way to guarantee that. However, you can reduce the odds. If you get rid of the gun-free zone policy, as I said, mass shootings don't occur in gun-free zones. I sent every one of you a photograph of a sign in Claude Independent School District
30
here
seconds.
in Texas. Take a look at that photograph and imagine whether or not the shooter would want to go into that school. We all know many school districts in Texas and other places allow concealed carry in the schools. I ask each of you to call the school board members in those school districts and ask them, how did you come to this decision? How does it work? Do you have any problems? I think you'll find that not a single one of the imaginary
time is
problems
up, Mr. Reynolds.
have occurred. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next up, Corey Glover. Let's make sure that mic is on for him, please. Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes, Mr. Glover, and Ms. Helliger will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Dupree and the Fort Bend ISD Board. My name is Corey Glover, and I'm a senior at Elkins High School. I'm here today to voice my concern about the safety update Dr. Dupree sent out on Friday. In his safety update, he mentioned that the Board of Trustees will be discussing additional ways to secure our schools. One of the items he listed was the board potentially arming staff members in schools. As a student, I feel that arming staff members is not the answer for increasing school safety. The reason being is that I feel that armed staff members will use their weapons to protect themselves from students instead of protecting students against dangerous individuals. Also, a student could potentially disarm a staff member or gain access to a locked weapon. Finally, there is also a strong possibility of a student being hit in the crossfire when a teacher fires their weapon. These reasons alone are valid enough to justify why the board should not allow staff members to be armed with weapons. As a student, I do not feel safe in school. This is why I'm asking the board to invest more funds in securing our schools by hiring more police officers. Finally, I'm asking that before the board makes this big decision that you give the community an opportunity to vote and voice their opinions about this. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. David Bandel.
Good evening, distinguished board members. Dr. Dupree, it's always a pleasure. Again, I want to address Parkland. We all kind of know what happened out there. There were a lot of things, there were several failures. There were some slightly embarrassing situations. I don't really want to go into the details of Warren versus District of Columbia or Castle Rock versus Gonzales. The fact that these police officers held back and didn't engage is an embarrassment to them more than anything else. I don't blame them. They have every right to expect to go home to their families at night. However, people who are already out there and engaged, such as the teachers, who, as the gentleman already pointed out, are the first people on the scene, they should have the opportunity to defend themselves. I would leave all the legal questions to the lawyers. I'm not prepared to discuss any of that. But what would this cost us? Well, actually, it wouldn't be that much. If you take a look at the handguns that are available for concealed carry, something like a SIG P320 would cost about $650. Amortized over 20 or even 10 years is only $5 a month. 250 rounds of practice ammo for the teachers, $63. That's my cost, but that's not bulk. And, gee, if we just knew somebody who owned a gun range who could give us a good deal on teachers getting armed and trained there. Good group pricing. Sorry, Kristen. Just had to throw that out there. I think we could go a long way to protecting our students. The teachers have a vested interest in protecting themselves, and some of them will protect their students with their lives. They're not going to harm the students, not deliberately. Yes, we know, those of us who've been there know that in a firefight, bullets go everywhere. And the two shooters can miss each other completely. And nobody knows how they're going to react. That's what happened at Parkland. The officers didn't engage. Okay, you have 4 minutes. And those are critical minutes. Somebody's got to engage. And if you're already there, you're going to do something, even if it's wrong.
30
it's
seconds.
Save lives. So I'm asking the board to consider this and help our teachers protect our students. Thank you very much. Hey, I hope to see you all on the range.
Thank you for being here. Next up, Carrie Waschenfelder.
Hello. I was to come today to talk with you about budget items, but that was before the Parkland shootings. So I'll just tell you briefly that our union has put together a proposal that we think are the best options for whatever cuts you feel that you need to make, including a list of those that we think should be sacrosanct and should not be cut at all from the budget. So we'll be presenting that to you at another time. But right now, I did want to relay to you how our teachers in the Fort Bend Employee Federation feel. We have over 1,850 members, and I surveyed them to find out some interesting things that I felt in my heart would be true and that came through in the survey. One is that 90% of teachers say that they could not and would not shoot at a student, period. 85% said they could not sign up to carry a firearm and would not want to carry it throughout the day on them. So we have huge numbers that are against the idea of gun carry for teachers in the schools. You have a great philosophical burden if you're going to attempt to ask teachers to do this. This goes against our training as nurturers, educators, protectors. This is not what we do best. And it's very foreign to people that are of that ilk. And I don't think that you're going to get the kind of response that you're expecting. Meanwhile, we know that there are myriad things that we can do. And I just want to tell you from my personal experience, when I go into some of the schools on the east side that have been renovated, including Missouri City Middle School, There is no way, in my mind, that someone could get through, because there's no way I've been able to get through. Unless somebody has buzzed me in, there is no way I could get in that door. The receptionist center, where she slides my ID back and forth, is less than what you have at a movie theater where you buy your tickets. Those schools give me a lot of confidence. It doesn't give me confidence when the 6-year-old opens the cafeteria door for me to go through, which happened just within the last 3 or 4 months. And it doesn't give me confidence when you go into a school like Austin High, and the same thing with Thurgood Marshall, same thing with Bush, same thing with
30 seconds.
Kempner. All these, no, it's not Kempner, I take that back. When you walk in, there's nobody to stop you. It's a beautiful, bright day. So we have these contrasts that we need to take care of. And I think we need to do an audit of our district and take into account everything from metal detectors to more advancements, more use of bond funds. I'm going to tell you, the teachers would support those kind of renovations.
What time is that, Ms. Washington?
Before they would think about carrying a gun in the classroom.
Thank you. Next up, Rodrigo Carrion.
Okay, my name is Rodrigo Carrion. I come to speak on item 648, relating safety and security, and I still come and strongly support. That's the purpose of our First Amendment right for our students to learn, K through 12, to learn how to speak up what's going on wrong, what they know what's going on wrong, to come and share, to bring it up where our public officials to do something about it. If our public officials are not listening or not researching, then how can things be stopped? It won't be stopped. And one purpose that these tragedies are happening, like over here in Florida, is because our justice system is out of order. Out of order, why? Because it's permitting these crooks or criminals to get away with or buy themselves out of jail. We need discipline. Discipline, even student discipline, corporate punishment, which I had during my time, 70s and 80s, and discipline in our justice system. Many of these crooks are buying themselves out, even after they kill somebody, $25,000, and they're out on bonds. No, that's why we need new lawmakers to come and fix these issues and to bring justice for all. Because if they don't bring it, they'll hear supporting the NRA for more guns. Guns is not the issue. Our issue is more communication, more justice for our people. And that's the best way to get things done and solved. Because guns, for teachers, like stated, it's not going to solve, it's not the issue. And also, we need, or like in Florida, what happened? Or the students running away? No, our students, our teachers should be leaders to hold them back. If they hear an alarm, fire alarm, our principal should be able to announce it. Hey, there's fire, or there's something, hold yourself back. And why is that? I'm speaking on that because I myself was a leader in elementary. The principal elected me and others to be leaders during a fire alarm. We were responsible to open the door and let the people out if everything was going something was wrong, keep the doors open or not. But we're heads and the leaders to make sure everybody was out nice and safely, right in order, right behind the teacher, and that way nobody would just run crazy. And after that, I was responsible to make sure everybody was safely out. And before I gave the order to the principal, okay, everybody's out, now we can come back in. So we came back in nice and safely. But over here in Florida, a false alarm, everybody just ran out and started shooting. Nah,
30
that's
seconds.
Out of order. And that's the importance of getting our voters out and make sure justice is done. And also, we might bring back this fig tree or which is prayers to our schools to make sure people know, and are there injustice side and God's side for justice or injustice, which we're right now, relates to Possum 2. Possum 2, what's going on wrong? Why is our nation, so people are so angry? Or why? Because we're working and unitedly, but against God's word.
Your time is up, Mr. Carrion.
Which is totally wrong. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next up, Jason Teague. Not here. Has Rizwana Sultana come in? You'll have 3 minutes to speak, And Ms. Helliger will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining.
Okay. So I am one of the parent of a student in Fort Bend ISD, and I'm also a pediatric sleep physician, and parents have invited me to talk about the school start hours. So I will read the American Academy of Pediatrics statement on school start time, that insufficient sleep in adolescents is an important factor in their health, which as well as academic success of our nation's middle and high school students. Although a number of factors, including biological changes in their sleep behavior, they are unable to fall asleep easily at night, including lifestyle choices, electronics, texting, academic demands, lots of homeworks, especially for high school kids, jobs, late night sports activities, all these things keep them awake. And if the school time is starting before 8 o'clock, that is before their biological clock tells them to wake up, so that is before their wake time, which is usually around 8 o'clock. That results in so many negative effects on their health, and there is a bunch of research done on what are the consequences of having short sleep time in teenagers, including poor academic results, obesity, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, gun carrying, violence, roadside accidents. These are all related to short sleep duration, while most of the factors I listed in their regarding their sleep duration are not fixable or not easily fixable, but the school start time is something we can consider. So AAP recommend that the school district to optimize sleep in students urge high school and middle school to start time at 8:30. And the research shows even increasing 1 hour of sleep time in teenagers, it results in high academic achievement, less being tardy, less being sleepy in schools, less motor vehicle accidents. Imagine these teenagers who just learned to drive and they're sleepy, less violence as compared to people who are sleeping for 5 hours and people who are sleeping for 7 hours. And I have some of the abstracts which I will submit here so you guys can look into detail manuscripts. So all increasing just 1 hour of sleep can help with obesity, depression, suicidal ideation, and teen drowsy driving. So I would recommend, or I would highly
30 seconds.
Suggest to consider our teens' mental health, academic excellence, safety, safe driving, and please talk about school timings, which can help us addressing these issues which we are talking about, gun violence and suicidal ideations and depression, anxiety, and related stuff. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Has Jason T. come in? Okay. Okay, next up on our agenda are information items. We'll start with the annual demographic update. Dr. Dupree.
Yes, ma'am. We've got actually the first 3 information items all kind of work hand in hand. We'll be talking about our annual demographic update presented by PASA, the consultant we use to do our demographic work. And then we're going to go right into the annual enrollment update about how we plan to use our facilities and utilization for the next year. And then the update on the facilities master plan update. We'll just go through those seamlessly. So I'll turn it over, I guess, is someone going to introduce Beth Martinez, our Chief of Staff and Strategic Planning, will introduce our guest speaker this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. Good evening, board members. I'd like to introduce our demographer, Population and Survey Analyst, PASA, and we have with us this evening Justin Silhavy and Stacy Tapera to share with us our short-term and long-term projections. They've been studying the housing market and many aspects of our community, and they're here to share that with you this evening in depth. Justin, thank you for being here.
Can everyone hear me? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to just jump right into everything here. I just want to.
You might have to speak a little closer to the mic, or closer to the mic. Either way.
I feel like I'm bending over here. I'll try my best. How about that?
Or you can bend it. You might can take. Yeah. There you go.
I think that's about as high as it's going to go. Okay. There we go. I just wanted to say we are kind of in the midst of a housing boom here in Fort Bend. I know we said it last year, but you are at the peak of what I would say is going to be the most growth you have, what you had in a long time. I'd say 20 years, and it's going to peak very soon. But but you will remain having quite a bit of housing growth for a while, but we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. But I think you're in the midst of it right now, and I know you all know that. But we'll go over that right now, and then Dr. Tapera will come up and discuss student projections with you. So without any further ado, I just want to kind of go over where we are today and where we've been over the last 5 years regionally. Fort Bend has seen about 4,600, almost 4,700 students added in the 5-year period from 2011 to 2016. The next TEA update is coming very soon, but we don't have that for you guys. But as you can see, most of the suburban, northern, and southern districts are seeing very similar growth that you guys are. And when you put that in percent change, you and Sci-Fair ISD, both very mature school districts, are both sitting at about 6.4 to 6.7% growth in that 5-year period. So ever since the energy sector boom of 2013 and 2014, your rate of growth annually has been anywhere from 1.3 to 1.4%. It's been very consistent in these last 3 to 4 years. We expect that to continue. And speaking of high growth districts, when you look at the largest gains in enrollment statewide, Fort Bend is actually number 6 in Houston. You see on here it's number 13 statewide, but it's actually number 6 in numeric growth in the Houston MSA, with about 1,000 students added from 2015 to 2016. So what makes you guys unique? We have some very positive things in this district that home builders see. Home builders want to be here because they know that you have a lower economically disadvantaged population. They know that your median household income is $86,000, about $20,000, $25,000 more than the average in the Houston metro. And also your star passage rate is quite a bit higher than the state average at nearly 80%. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time on kindergarten. This has become pretty important over the last few years. You'll see that dip in the births line here. This is births compared to kindergarten enrollment. You've seen this before, but we see this red line, which is our births aged 5 years. We saw that it dipped, and that was a statewide dip. That was the financial recession. It's come up. So if you look from 2010 to 2013, the number of births in this school district were nearly flat at about 0.05%. Very, very low. But from 2013 to 2016, births have increased 21%. So those are all babies that were born, and they're not even 5 years old yet. So we know that there's a little bit of growth coming. There's a little bit of a bulge after that recession caused births to decline. In Chapter 3 of your report that you have in front of you, you're going to see a lot of information about charter schools, private schools. We've added to that this year. And this is a new map. It's showing in fall 2016 the number of students that are being pulled from your district to charter schools. And these charter schools can be anywhere. So these are even including some of the virtual campuses that we have statewide. But basically, Fort Bend ISD has about 3,300 students residing in it that attend charter schools. And the reason we're showing you this is because it's becoming more important. We have a lot of different charter schools popping up, in particular right now in the northern fringes of this school district. The newest one this year was a high school on Beechnut in the Grand Mission subdivision. And they opened this year with 9th and 10th grade. It's in the Grand Mission Estates community. So those will keep happening. When you look at it percentage-wise, you guys are number 3 in the metro area, but percentage-wise, you're actually quite lower in the ranks, about 7th ranking of where the students are pulling from. So you're seeing you have about 4.6% of your resident K through 12 students in charter schools. So when you look at it in terms of percentages, how many students are in private schools, charter schools, and then of course in Fort Bend ISD, we're seeing about just under 90% of all the resident K-12 students in Fort Bend. And charter schools have slowly been increasing their percentage. So 2 years ago, we had about 3.5% of all students in this district in charter schools. we estimate that it's about 4.1% this year. So it's creeping up slowly. So employment has actually been on the rise in the Houston area over the last few months. I'd say over the last 3 months. Hurricane Harvey helped, believe it or not. It helped increase employment region-wide as construction workers and other people involved in the rebuilding process have gotten jobs, but also the oil industry and the energy sector has rebounded. And I'll go into that in a little bit, but we're sitting at about 4% unemployment in Fort Bend County. A year ago it was about 5. So we've seen a lot of job growth in the last year compared to 2015, 2016, when we saw no job growth virtually. And here's that visually from June 2012 all the way to today. This bar chart shows monthly gains in employment metro-wide. So I've highlighted those 2 months there. That's October and November of 2017, where we actually saw 15 to 20,000 monthly gains in employment metro-wide. That actually compares to the highest month back in 2012, 2013. So as I said, the oil industry has kind of rebounded. We're sitting at about $64 a barrel. Anything over 60 is really considered good, where companies can actually start hiring again. And so we've hit that this year. I expect that to continue. We also see a lot of growth in the medical center. So right now, there are $3 billion of investment in the med center. And you know, that's right down Fort Bend Parkway. So we're expecting upwards of 6,000 new jobs with these large research facilities and hospitals that are being built right now. A lot of those jobs will be in this southwestern sector of the metro area. And interestingly, the state of Texas has finally approved a study to study the Freeport-Rosenberg rail line. And I know that's outside of this district, but it can affect the entire county. If a rail line were to get built connecting the booming port of Freeport to Rosenberg, we could see even more industrial growth in Lamar CISD, which could actually increase jobs in Fort Bend, or employment and the workforce in Fort Bend ISD. As for employment and the workforce, we actually showed that this district has a very diverse workforce, which is great in times of turmoil. You guys saw you were affected less by the energy downturn. And a lot of that has to do with your diversity in your workforce. So when we wrap all this up into housing, one thing we want to look at transportation first. So where are our new transportation thoroughfares? Where can we actually see new development occurring because of new thoroughfares? And I want to point out the South Freeway managed lanes. I know 288 seems far away, but from the eastern side of this school district, it's not. And those managed lanes are under construction. Right now, they're planned to open in 2019. That will improve access to that far southeastern part of this district. We also have the county, their latest bond, that $218 million bond that was passed in November. 521, FM 521 is slated to be improved to about 4 lanes throughout Fort Bend ISD. I'm not quite sure on the timeline yet, but that's a big item, because as you'll see in a minute, a lot of the growth that we've increased is actually occurring in that eastern part of your district. So Fort Bend ISD ranks #1 of all 61 Houston school districts in terms of housing starts. And this is for about, I want to say, the second year in a row. We saw about 3,187 new home starts in 2017, up 4%. And I want to highlight these particular developments here, and they're all occurring in that FM 521 corridor. Glendale Lakes, Southern Colony, and Huntington Place. No one probably knows what Huntington Place is. I was told just a few days ago it broke ground. Long Lake Development is building this. It is in the far southeastern tip of your district, and we can expect 900 homes. It's been on the books for a while. It went dormant during the recession, but it's back, and it's actually happening. So we can see that start up. I'd say we might have homes for next fall if they really get going, but it really won't get going until 2019. Glendale Lakes has actually ramped up seen more engineering plats coming through with the city of Arcola than we've ever seen before. I think they had about 30 homes occupied as of this fall, finally, right there around Heritage Rose. And Southern Colony has been pretty much taken over by D.R. Horton. That's between Glendale Lakes and Huntington Place, all in that 521 corridor. So I'm expecting this corridor to really increase in terms of housing development. And as I said, with access to 288, we're going to see it increase more and more and more as the years go on. And I did want to spend a second to talk about these multifamily tax credits. I know we hear about them a lot. You know, ever since the 2015 Supreme Court ruling saying that Texas needed to spread out where these tax credits were granted, we've seen more and more applications in this school district, and really in most suburban school districts, just because the poverty rate is lower in the suburbs where we can actually have these built now. So the next chart shows you where the pre-applications since 2013, these are pre-applications for tax credit apartments in Fort Bend ISD. We've gone from 3 to 12 in 2018. Now, a lot of these are age restricted, so we don't even care about them. They're for seniors and usually maybe single resident occupancy or something like that. Now, generally, only 1 to 2 of these have been awarded within Fort Bend ISD. So even though the number of these has been ticking up, we're really not seeing an increase in the number awarded, because I believe the system might actually be working. For a while, we didn't know. It was so new. They've changed the rules and regulations since 2015. But we're seeing these spread out more. So even though Fort Bend's getting a lot of these applications, you see them come through your office every year, we're not seeing the awarded numbers increase at the same rate. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because we generally see more bedrooms in these apartments, 3, 4 bedroom units, so we actually have more students, so they can affect our schools. Now, in terms of where we think the highest growth will occur in our new single family developments, that's where most of the growth occurs in Fort Bend, Sienna Plantation tops the list, and that's kind of in that 521 corridor. You know, it's in that southeast part of the district. As the development ages, as they build, they're moving east toward 521. So we're anticipating just over 5,000 housing units, single family housing units, in the next 10 years to be built and occupied. There's still 2,400 left to be built and occupied after the 10-year period, though. So don't think that 5,000 is it. Sienna alone has about just under 8,000 housing units to be occupied. Aliana's next with 1,700. Most of that, you'll notice, is in the first 5 years of the projection period because they're building out rapidly. Aliana, Harvest Green, both of those are building out rapidly. So most of those homes in those 2 communities are projected to be occupied by 2022. Rounding out this list, you'll see some of those neighborhoods I mentioned in the 521 corridor. So they don't look that impressive alone, but when you start adding them up, that's a lot of homes right there in that southeastern part of the district. And of course, Parks Edge and Lakeview Retreat, they're kind of right there in the middle. Those are 2 new communities. Parks Edge is north along Lake Olympia Parkway, just west of Fort Bend Parkway. It's been that's another dormant neighborhood that's had about 3 different developers try to develop it. It's going. They broke ground, I believe, in October. So we're gonna start to see students, this year you won't see too many for this fall, but after this fall you'll start seeing more and more students generated in Parks Edge. Lakeview Retreat is just south of West Park Tollway on the other side of the district. It's a 1,000-lot community, another D.R. Horton community. Both of those, that one broke ground right before Harvey, so I believe it got delayed a little bit. And when we put these projections together, they had kind of had to stall slightly. So I expect it to go forward. They just may have gotten a little bit of a delay. So when we look at the whole picture, all housing units, single family, multifamily, and anything else, we're anticipating 35,000, just about 35,000 new housing units in the next 10 years to be occupied. Most of those are single family, 23,000 of those. you'll notice that the single family is actually, we're projecting it to drop off. And I mentioned that earlier. We're kind of in that peak. We're seeing so many new developments building out at the moment. We're going to see that slow down, but we're anticipating multifamily to pick up as they fill in those leftover commercial spots. Now, I wanted to point out, too, that we're projecting just over 2,000 age-restricted housing units. I mentioned a lot of those tax credit housing units that get approved are age-restricted. A lot of them are in this district. So 6% of that 35,000 is age-restricted. And we account for that, of course, in our projections, so we know students won't be there. So that's actually a pretty high number. So where exactly is all this housing coming? Where is it going? I've mentioned all these neighborhoods, but you'll see some of these hotspots. The 99 corridor over the next 5 years is where we're going to see a lot of that growth. Aliana, Harvest Green. Riverstone is still building, and of course Sienna. But when we look at the 10-year from 2017 to 2027, you'll notice the 521 corridor really blows up. So Sienna continues to boom. They're probably going to have more homes built over. We're projecting that there will be more occupancies as time goes on, just because neighborhoods like Riverstone are building out. So the next place for people to leap over is to Sienna Plantation. Now, you hear us talk about number of students per home. And that number has actually been slightly declining. Again, this year it ticked down to 0.55 students per single family home in this district. So every year it goes down just a little bit. And that's because you have a general aging of the population. In 2010, the median age in this district was 36. It's now 36.5, and it's even with all the new housing. So you're seeing that aging out a little bit, and multifamily is actually aging a little bit as well, interestingly. Normally that goes up, but in this district it's actually going down slightly to 0.4. So we, of course, put these together, these ratios of students per housing unit for every single development, and I did want to point out a couple in this list. Aliana at the very top. In 2014, there were 0.42 students per home, and now there's 0.6. So as the students age, as the community gains schools, people want to live there with children, you actually see more students per home. And then also I wanted to point out the very last one on the list, Woodbridge. We don't talk about it because it's built out, but the ratio there, that's off Highway 6, north of 90, has gone from 0.83 in 2014 to 0.77. So you're seeing an aging out of those students. There was a big bulge in the population. So now Stacy will come up and she will kind of put all this together into how it's affecting your schools and future student enrollment.
Thank you. You've heard a lot of information tonight, and so just to briefly summarize how all of this fits together, you have heard from Justin about employment trends in the economy, new housing units where those are projected to be built, how many students to be yielded from each of those housing units. We also, so that is one part of our projections. We start with the current students, where they are living now, geocode those students, and we also look very carefully. We won't talk about it much tonight, but there's a real important task that goes into this, that is studying where students are moving within the school district and not necessarily in new housing. So in those built out neighborhoods, as students graduate and leave home, are those parents staying put and having fewer children in the schools, or are those empty nest parents selling their homes to younger families who are regenerating the schools? And those trends are very important, especially long term, when we think about the makeup in 10 years of a maturing district like Fort Bend. So all of these get put together into our projections model by planning unit. Those are the little census block group defined units by year and by grade group. So I'm asked this every year, and so we just prepared the slide. How did our projections last year compare to the enrollment? So the blue bars are the enrollment over the past few years in this district, and the maroon bars are our last year's projections under the low growth, moderate growth, and high growth scenarios. So as you can see, the enrollment from this last fall's PM snapshot date fell squarely between the low and moderate growth scenarios. So we were 140 over the low growth scenario.
Mr. Parra, I'm going to ask you to speak into the microphone, please, ma'am.
Oh, sorry.
It's not coming through very loudly, and we want to make sure that the video is picking up.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the enrollment as of last fall's snapshot, PM snapshot date, falls squarely between our low growth and moderate growth scenarios. Again, all of those factors that we took into account into our model are developed into these three scenarios of growth: low, moderate, and high. And over the 10-year projection period, we anticipate that the enrollment in Fort Bend ISD could range from almost 82,000 anywhere up to almost 89,000 students by the year 2027, with the moderate growth scenario being the scenario that we generally recommend following for long-range planning, and that would be 85,700 students in 10 years. Beginning with next year, 2018, we project 75,900 students to be enrolled in the district, with each year after that growing between 1 and 1.5% annually, for finally a total of 85,700 students under the moderate growth scenario in 10 years. Now, how does that relate to where is that growth happening in the district, and how does that relate to the capacities of the existing schools? So the red and orange are the hotspots of projected student growth. These are similar to what Justin has shown as far as the new housing, but not entirely, because, as he mentioned, some of that new housing does not yield students because it's age restricted. So of course the hotspots here in the northwest are in Aliana, in Madden Elementary, and Neal Elementary is Harvest Green. We also are projecting growth in Avalon and Commonwealth Elementary. The new Park's Edge here, this is along the Fort Bend Parkway, and that would affect Palmer Elementary. And of course, Leonetti in in Sienna Plantation is another hotspot of growth, and this is the three new subdivisions Justin was speaking about: Huntington Place and Glendale Lakes and Southern Colony. So these are all of the numbers included here only for reference later to go back to, because clearly you can't. It's not useful to try to go through all of these numbers on a screen, but I do draw your attention to Leonetti here, and by the end of this projection period, almost 2,000 students projected to live within what is currently the Leonetti attendance zone. Likewise, Madden is also projected to have over 2,000 students by the end of this projection period. Now, how does that relate to the capacities of those schools, and geographically, what does that mean? So I just mentioned that Madden and Leonetti both are projected to have 2,000 students by the end of this projection period. So those are the red, the red attendance zones representing greater than 200% utilization. In other words, each of those schools in 10 years will house enough students to fill 2 schools, 200%. Those are followed by Neal, with over 1,400 students, Palmer with 1,300, Parks with 1,000, Heritage Rose with 1,900, etc. So you can see where the where the concentration and overcrowding is projected to occur. And can you still not hear me? Okay. And these will be the areas of focus for the upcoming Master Facilities Planning Committee that you will hear about in a little bit. At the middle school level, similar colors and positions of growth in the northwest, that growth will affect Bowie and to some extent Garcia and Crockett. Fort Settlement with the new Avalon, and then the Sienna growth, of course. Oh, thank you very much, very kind. Would affect Thornton in the far southeast. Again, these numbers are for posterity, but it's important to note that the red column is our projections for enrollment next fall, and these take into account all of the transfers that happen among schools, including the transfers into the GT program in Quail Valley. However, assuming that those transfers will remain constant for 10 years is not a valid assumption. And we are demographers, we project where people will live. And so the blue numbers are the projected resident population for all of these attendance zones. And so the red column cannot be compared directly to the blue columns, but the blue columns are there for you to understand where that growth is projected to occur. At the middle school level, Bowie is projected to be, this is 10 years, and I failed to mention this earlier. This is if we take all of the students that are projected to live in each of these attendance zones in 10 years and compare it to the capacity of the schools today. So if you do nothing, if you don't build any new schools, if you don't rezone, if you don't move any programs, if everything stays the same, this is the projected utilization. Bowie at about 125%, Fort Settlement at about 135%, and then, of course, Thornton rounding out the list at over 140% utilization by the end of this projection period. So that's after 10 years, and that would be about 2,000 students. And finally, at the high school level, again, the growth in the short-term growth in the Northwest would affect Travis and Bush high schools and Austin as well. Some growth in Elkins projected. The new Parks Edge development would affect Hightower, and then finally Ridge Point, with the growth both from Sienna Plantation as well as from the new development along the 521 corridor. Again, the red column includes the transfers in the schools where we are projecting that they will attend. So all of the academy students are counted in their academy programs in the red column. However, in the blues, those students are counted at their home campuses. And so that's why you can see, for example, Travis looks like it's declining by 200 students from 18 to 19, but it's not. It's just the effect of the transfers in for the academic programs. And so finally, at the high school level, the rezoning that occurred several years back, that is just now in its last year of grandfathering, was very successful in distributing the student population in the Northwest between Bush, Travis, and Austin, such that even though you've seen these last several slides showing growth in the Northwest, those high schools are equipped enough to handle that projected population up to about 105% utilization over the next 10 years. Ridge Point, of course, is the big red, the areas of highest growth. By about 2019, we're projecting about 3,000 residents to live in the Ridge Point attendance zone, going up to about 3,500 by about 2022. So that will clearly be one of the focuses for the upcoming Master Facilities Committee discussion about what can be done about the upcoming overcrowding at Ridge Point. And so at this point, I can take questions, and then shortly thereafter, you will hear from Beth about this, and Scott Leopold as well, about this upcoming Master Facilities Plan.
Thank you, Dr. Tapera and Mr. Silhavy. Do we have questions from the trustees right now? Mrs. James?
My only question, thank you very much for a very nice report and powering through those slides really well. That was awesome. Could you remind me where the southern colony, I didn't catch that when you were saying that. I think it's on you said in the 521 corridor. Is it east of 521?
It is. So it's between the district border and 521, and it is south of Heritage Rose Elementary. If you can kind of picture where that is. You go
Okay.
down about a mile, mile and a half.
Okay, I think so. I think I got it.
And the new community is actually south of of that one, Southern Colony.
All right, and then the Glendale.
That's where Heritage Rose is.
Okay.
That's that community.
Thank you.
Mr. George?
I just have a real quick question about the east side of FM 521. We see that there is a lot of growth is going to happening there. So how it is going to impact our, especially elementary schools in that area?
Well, as you can see, that's largely the Heritage Rose attendance zone. And so that's what it looks like visually. And we have projected that Heritage Rose will grow from about 900 students resident currently to about 1,900 by the end of the projection period.
Okay. What about Blue Ridge Elementary? What kind of impact it's going to bring?
Blue Ridge is projected to remain fairly constant with some aging out of that population as well.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Ms. Helliger?
Thank you for the report. I was actually pretty shocked that we didn't hear anything about a lot about Shadow Creek Ranch, since maybe about almost 2 years ago we had a lot of our people from that particular community to come and visit with us and talk about the growth that was happening in that particular subdivision. And when I look at page, I'm not sure what page this is, maybe 23, you have a new housing occupancies projected from October 27 to October 22nd. It shows it in yellow that area was Shadow Creek Ranch, which is the northeast part of FM 521. But then I was surprised to see, and then even from a 10-year growth, we have greater than 500, if I'm reading this correctly, on page 24. In that particular area of new housing occupancies. But when I relate that to your slide around the actual growth of students per subdivision. Sorry, I should have marked it. Is it 33? 34. Yeah, that one. Is that one? I can't see. Yes, Shadow Creek Ranch, that's the one, yes. So it really showed, if I'm reading this correctly, five students?
5 students per 100 homes.
Per what?
Per 100 homes.
Oh, wow.
So,
If you'll speak into the mic, please.
0.05 students per home.
Right.
So even though we're seeing housing growth in that neighborhood, and really truly Shadow Creek Ranch is mostly built out, there's a neighboring neighborhood just south of it that still has some homes. It's also seeing very few students per home. So that's the thing. You see housing growth there, but we're just not seeing students generated in Fort Bend schools.
So it's because they're taking their kids elsewhere? Is that what's happening?
Or they don't have students. Maybe people moving in are older or younger without children. There could be many variables.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Not new. It's been that way
Right.
over the past several years.
Yeah, I'm seeing the trend. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger. Okay, thank you both very much. Appreciate your report. Appreciate you being here. All right, we're up for our
Beth.
enrollment review.
Go ahead.
You're on, Beth.
All right, thank you very much. So using that breadth and depth of information that PASA provided, we begin our annual student enrollment, of course, guided by board policy CT local for efficient and effective use of our facilities, and FC local, where we look at our school attendance areas and enrollment and the decisions that we're guided to make based on the knowledge that we have on our projections, and then those items that we might need to have further consideration around that we would bring to the board if in fact we saw a need for new boundaries in the coming school year, or closing or consolidating a campus and that sort of thing. So what we're bringing to you this evening is to look at 2018-2019 projections, where those really great areas of growth are and how we'll be managing that growth, and the areas of underutilization in the district and what that will look like for us in 18-19. Stacy mentioned a little bit about the facilities planning process, and as you know, that is going on parallel to this work. And so as we look at those areas of significant growth and significant underutilization, the Facilities Master Planning Steering Committee is taking all of this into consideration, and we'll be looking at this data in depth along with feedback from the community this week during their next steering committee meeting. So I want to begin in the northwest area of the district. No, it's not working. So let's move to the northwest area of the district, where Madden Elementary is still one of our overutilized campuses. And so what we're doing there to mitigate the overutilization is no student transfers. So not even employees, students would transfer, because that's a school that's over 100% utilization. We're also currently utilizing 4 portable buildings, and those will remain for next school year. And then, as you know, this year we capped enrollment, and that cap of enrollment will continue in the 18-19 school year with students who are new to Madden Elementary in 1st through 5th grade being overflowed into Oyster Creek Elementary. Kindergarten students will continue to enroll at Madden because we want to maintain that kindergarten cohort moving forward. This will go through the year that we anticipate opening Elementary School 51, and that's slated for 2019-20. In the northwest area of the district, we have several schools that are underutilized in the area, and you can see those on the screen there. Many elementary schools, and then 3 of our middle schools, Garcia, Hodges Bend, and Sartarsha Middle School. Just as a reminder, we consider overutilization at 120% or more and underutilization at 80% or less. So moving to the central area of the district, we have
Can I jump in real quick? I just want to understand that last slide. So does low utilization mean underutilization? Does that refer to the number you just gave us?
Is there under 80% utilization in the projected model for 18-19?
Thank you.
And just one more note of specificity, that's at the core, so that does not include any temporaries that might be there. When we look at some of our overutilized campuses, I'll break that down for you. What does it look like with current overutilization, and then what does the utilization look like with temporary buildings?
But for Holly, does that now include the new classrooms?
Yes, very good point.
Thank you.
For all of our campuses that received the 10 packs or the 12 pack at Cornerstone, you'll see the utilization reflected, including those campus additions. So you heard Dr. Tapera mention that we have a high growth area there at Commonwealth Elementary School, and Commonwealth is currently this school year at 126% utilization. We are going to be providing additional temporary buildings at Commonwealth to manage that enrollment, but if not for additional temporaries, then the core utilization in 18-19 would be at 138%. So that's one area of the district where we'll be looking very closely with the steering committee to determine what needs to occur. You'll see similar patterns at Fort Settlement Middle School moving into the 2020 school year, where they will approach 120% utilization. I've mentioned this before, the art and science of the temporary buildings, and truly we still follow that model. It is an art and a science. You have the science of the numbers, but then the art and those relationships and conversations with principals to see how their master schedules work and what their the configuration within their building. And so we'll talk more about that as we move into the next few years with the continued growth. At Commonwealth, we'll be limiting those student transfers and utilizing temporary buildings.
Is that in addition to the temporary buildings that are there now? Is that what you're?
Yes, it is in addition to the temporaries that are there. I believe we have 4 and we're adding 2 more. Is that correct, Oscar, at Commonwealth?
That is correct. That's what we're looking at bringing to the board. Thank you. All right, so moving on to our low utilization campuses within the central area, we have Barrington Place, Dulles, First Colony, Lexington Creek, and Lakeview, and those are all under 80%. Moving to the southeast area of the district, and so that's that high growth area. You may be surprised to learn that at this moment we don't have schools approaching 120% utilization, but that changes significantly in the coming couple of years. So as we move forward in that area, you will see Parks Elementary in 2019 reach 128%, and Thornton approaching 121% in 2024, with Ridgepoint at 123 in 2020. And so I just wanted to give you a glimpse of that growth that Stacy mentioned. These campuses listed here and the year that they will approach 120% utilization. So you see the next couple of years we have those 3 schools, and then significant growth from 2021 through 2024. So in summary, for the 18-19 school year, we're implementing the boundary for Ronald Thornton Middle School. We'll be limiting student transfers in those areas of high growth that we talked about with regard to employee transfers, utilizing portable buildings by either sending or receiving to schools that are over and underutilized. We'll continue to monitor enrollment and our projected enrollment and work with the facilities steering committee around that, and then present future considerations based on the study of these long-term projections in relation to the work of the steering committee when we bring to you the update for the facilities master plan in May.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. We appreciate that update. Do we have questions from the trustees?
Just
Mr. George?
Yeah, thank you. A quick question. I see that low utilization in the west side of our district. One is Garcia Middle School. And I'm just curious, you know, all this development happening in that area, what is the reason why still we have, or is just a current situation, eventually it will change, or what is the?
Well, Garcia Middle School over time is, and remember we did some rezoning when we redid the boundaries a couple of years ago in that area. And so Garcia Middle School really is even in the 80% range. It's in the 70s now, but it'll start to grow back up into the 80s, the low 80s through 2027.
Okay, and same question about Satassia Middle School, and I was just kind of surprised to see that it fall into that low utilization.
Yes, sir, and Sartarsha follows the similar pattern, going into the low 80s and maintaining up as high as about 86%, but staying in that kind of that sweet spot.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Leopold.
Very tall. You all hear me?
Yes.
It's great to be here again. A little jet lag. I want to start by just kind of doing a quick overview of the process. We started our process with our Futures Conference that we had several weeks ago. We had about 60 members show up and participated in conversations. After that, we convened our steering committee, which is composed of 30 members and 3 alternates. We're now in the process of gathering background data, so the demographic data that you're seeing tonight. We're also looking at some facility data from PBK. We're taking a closer look at some capacity data for the high schools. We're also looking at some program data. All the data we'll be collecting and putting together into GIS or geographic information systems so that the committee can view and manipulate this data spatially and see what the impacts are of potential changes. Last week we had 2 community meetings. We had one at Ridgepoint and one at Travis High School. The purpose of those meetings was to collect feedback around high-level educational framework concepts. And so at that meeting, we were talking about what are the issues that are facing Fort Bend ISD from a facilities and programmatic standpoint, and what are some possible solutions. And we wanted to kind of get some feedback and gauge tolerance for possible solutions. And what we're talking about is, you know, what do we want to do with the facilities that are overutilized? Do we want to add an addition? Do we want to use portables? Do we want to look at some schedule changes or some programmatic want to review our community engagement again. We had our Futures Conference on January 18th. We've also engaged several student groups of feedback we've collected as well. We had our community meeting number 1 again last week, February 20th and 22nd. Our dates for our community meeting number 2 are April 3rd, 4th, 10th, and 11th. And again, those are the meetings in which we'll be collecting feedback from the community around facility and programmatic options. Policies that we've been looking at throughout this process, of course, AE local, mission, vision, and core beliefs, and the profile of the graduate. We're also using CT local, CD local, and FC local, which again defines that capacity utilization, and that range that we're looking at of between 80 and 120%. So that's what I've got as far as just an overview of the process. We're kind of in the middle of it now, and have a lot more information coming in future updates. Any questions?
Questions from the trustees? My only question for you is, in the student feedback, which groups have you guys engaged?
Student Voices, Student Leadership 101 and 102.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for being here, Mr. Leopold. All right, next up is our safety and security update. Dr. Dupree?
Yes, I'd like to invite Police Chief Ryder to kind of provide this update for the board.
Good evening, President Tassin, members of the board, and Dr. Dupree. I'm here to deliver an update on the safety and security efforts in our district. We constantly look to improve our safety and security plans, our processes, the policies, and the things that we do to keep our schools safe. And in fact, we had planned to come in April or May and discuss future safety initiatives in detail. But as we know, Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida was rocked with a tragedy on Valentine's Day. And that tragedy has sparked increased discussion, a renewal of dialogue about safety and security across the country, and our community is no different. So we felt like tonight was an appropriate time to come and discuss a high-level overview of our safety and security efforts, areas of exploration for additional safety measures, and then immediate actions that we're taking in the interim. So safety and security is our top priority. We say that in the district, and I firmly believe that we exemplify that every day. But we can always get better. But in 2014, we developed a safety and security master plan. That was an all-hazards approach to safety and security. It used industry best practices, 4 interrelated elements of infrastructure, crisis communication and notification, staffing, and policies and procedures. And I'm happy to say that we took that to the community. It was well received. We brought it to the board, and we implemented that safety and security master plan. I'm also happy to say that a number of those projects in that safety and security master plan have already been implemented to help strengthen our schools. There's also a number of projects that are about to be completed at the end of the Phase 3 2014 bond. Some of those things are, we replaced internet analog cameras with internet protocol, IP cameras, at all of our campuses, and we significantly increased the number of cameras across the district. Only 19 campuses remain to have installation, and those will be complete in Phase 3 of the 2014 bond in August of 2018. Security vestibules were planned at all the schools that did not have a security vestibule in place, and upgrades were planned for the schools that did have security vestibules in place. Of the 41 planned installations, only 15 remain to be implemented and constructed, and they are in Phase 3 of the 2014 bond, and they will also be completed by August of 2018. We've included high-impact resistant window film for all of our vestibules and strategic exterior windows. That film, only 29 of 74 campuses remain to have that completed. Additional access control points are being added across the district to secure our exterior doors and strategic interior doors as well. The district adopted the standard response protocol in 2015. And since that time, we've trained every student and staff member on a standardized vocabulary of 4 words. And those 4 words will dictate any response to any given scenario. Those help our students and our staff members get to a safe place and do the right thing very quickly. A new emergency reference guide was developed that was designed specifically for Fort Bend ISD. It incorporates a standard response protocol. We've ordered over 7,500 of those emergency reference guides, and we've deployed those to every single classroom in the district and common areas. Each of our campuses has an identified emergency management liaison that we put in place in the last few years, and the purpose of that emergency management liaison is to be responsible for ensuring that drills are completed in a timely manner and to provide safety and security updates from our department to the campus at staff meetings. But even with all that, we know that discussion among community members, staff, and students is bringing awareness to the possibility of implementing additional safety measures that may increase the safety and security of our campuses. So during the coming weeks and months, we'll be having honest, meaningful exploration conversations while seeking valuable community input. And to that extent, a safety advisory committee is being developed to provide an opportunity for the district and the community members to discuss safety ideas collaboratively. We want to ensure that all available measures are being discussed and they're being taken into consideration to make Fort Bend ISD schools as safe as possible. Topics of discussion may include things that you've heard tonight. They may include the use of metal detectors in schools. They may include the use of armed and unarmed security officers. They may include the hiring of school marshals that's allotted under state law. They may include the hiring of additional Fort Bend ISD police officers, concealed carry by employees, and future security enhancements for school buildings. The Safety Advisory Committee will engage in deep discussion and provide input to the district on their ideas on the best course of action on these and similar topics. But we recognize that our community is looking to us for immediate actions and to put those actions in place where it's possible. So until the 2014 bond projects are complete in August, we are taking several measures to reassure our community that safety and security is our top priority. For instance, security vestibule construction is scheduled for phase 3 in the 2014 bond, but we are looking at moving up and expediting the construction schedule for the elementary schools in phase 3. Additionally, the Fort Bend ISD Police Department is in the final stages of executing a security contract with a local, highly reputable private security firm to provide armed and unarmed security officers at campuses where vestibules don't exist at this point. All emergency management liaisons that I discussed earlier, today they received updated active shooter training. And they left with hard copy material to take back to their campus to continue to train their staff and to have those discussions about visitor management and why that's important, the See Something, Say Something campaign, and Run, Hide, and Fight as that relates to the standard response protocol. Fort Bend ISD Police will continue to work with our partner agencies in maintaining a unified effort of visibility at our campuses. And we've renewed the dialogue on student IDs across the district. But one thing that's very important in what we've started doing is engaging our students in dialogue, because our students have a vested interest in the safety and security of their campuses. And we rely on them to be part of that safety solution. As a first step, Dr. Dupree and the staff released a video for the students on February 21st. And when we talk about a profile of a graduate, three of those things stick out in my mind. They have to be an effective communicator, they have to be a critical thinker, and they have to be a compassionate citizen. And I can't think of a topic that embodies those any more than school safety. And so we want that video to be the first step in the dialogue between students and staff members and the community to figure out how to safely and how to effectively secure the schools. And I believe there's a second video that's coming with Dr. Dupree and students as well. So that's a very brief overview of where we've been, where we're going, and what we're doing in the interim. I appreciate the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief Ryder. Before we take questions, first of all, I want to thank you for putting that together on short notice. Dr. Dupree and I had talked and really thought it was important to get this on the agenda this evening under the circumstances, and so I appreciate you putting that together for us and being able to address us this evening. I know that maybe all of our questions can't be answered, but I think it's critically important that the board have a dialogue about this and start the conversation, because I know this has weighed heavily on each of us as trustees, and the safety of our children and our staff is our most important priority. And so thank you for being here to answer our questions. Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mrs. Tesson, and thank you, Chief Ryder. Appreciate your presentation. Your knowledge in these matters is well known, and Fort Bend ISD Police Department has earned much recognition over the years under your leadership. Of course, we're all distressed about the recent shooting event that's happened. We've heard from many people who all seem to have their way of handling the situation, and if we don't follow their way, then we're in the wrong. But I'm going to defer to you, Chief, because you're the expert on this, in spite of what anybody else says. So I do have a couple of questions. One, shortly after this event took place, it's my understanding that Governor Abbott has requested the Commissioner of Education to ensure that all school districts have completed I believe it's a statutory safety and security update, and to post that. Can you advise us if we're in compliance with that already? Absolutely. We are in compliance with that. In September of 2017, we completed our 3-year safety audits. The board was given the district audit report. The acronym is DAR, the DAR tool. The superintendent signed off on it, and it was posted with the School Safety Center. That's the second time since I've been here that we complete that. Those safety audits for each school have to be completed every 3 years. Hurricane Harvey threw off the date on this last one in 2017, but we had all of our safety audits done ahead of that, and so the hurricane didn't affect us, and we were able to post those on time and in compliance. All right, so that's good to know. So in other words, we don't have to run out and hurry up and try to catch up with the governor's Johnny-come-lately mandate. No, sir. We're already there, which reinforces the fact that we do take safety and security very seriously here at Fort Bend ISD. Have we, I understand you mentioned that you're coming back with another presentation in April or May, and that presentation may include the idea of hiring additional police officers for our campuses, possibly hiring marshals. And are these marshals, are they like an air marshal on an airplane? No one knows who they are, and they're kind of roaming around and ready to respond? That's a good characterization. The state law requires that school marshals be plainclothes. Their identity is concealed. There are several other restrictions on them. But I think that's a topic of discussion for the Safety Advisory Committee to weigh the pros and cons, just like anything else we would talk about, and then make a recommendation. Okay. And did I understand you to say that you were in the process of bringing in a private security firm to analyze our plans and procedures, and perhaps you can update us in April or May as to how we may respond in the event of a tragedy?
The private security company that we're talking about is going to provide uniformed, armed or unarmed personnel at these schools where we don't have security vestibules. So they're going to act as additional eyes and ears. I've talked to each one of the principals that would be staffed first. They're very excited to have the extra help on the campus. It frees up staff members from having to watch the front entrance all day long. And in meeting with the private security firm, I'm very confident that we're going to have a good working relationship, and it's going to be very beneficial to the district.
Chief, you mentioned that we're now reaching out and engaging students, but in light of some of the comments that were made during public comment tonight, have we conducted a survey of our teachers to see how they feel about a variety of things, from having concealed carry to other ideas have ranged from having a fingerprint operated gun safe, I guess, either in the classroom or in the trunk of their car. We hear these topics bandied about, and have we undertaken a survey of our teachers?
From my department, we have not.
Okay.
I'm sure that's something that we could do. The only thing I can speak to is some of the Let's Talk dialogues that I've received from staff members, and overwhelmingly they were not in favor of having teachers armed and having armed teachers around their students. They would rather have trained individuals with those. And so again, that's where the Safety Advisory Committee will come into play. There's a couple of options to kind of meet that criteria without necessarily arming teachers. The School Marshal Program is a good example of that.
Okay, well, Chief, I really do appreciate your comments. I leave this matter in your capable hands. I know you'll be returning in April for an update. We may have updates before then, but I'm going to rely on your professional judgment, experience, and expertise when considering any item the administration may bring to us to vote on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chief. You stated that we can always get better, and I agree with that. I think we need to get better because there's really no one solution, as you know. I think everybody would agree to that. There's just no one solution that would cut down the risk of anything ever happening in one of our schools. And I think we all know if anything ever did happen, God forbid, we'd all feel partially responsible. And, you know, part of those solutions is, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were telling me how doors are left unlocked at their high schools and they're propped open all the time. That's the first thing, okay? And I would think that the shock and the horror of what just happened would force people to realize that a little inconvenience sure beats that. So I know a long time ago we talked about electronic locks. I don't know where we are in that as far as our schools go. I don't know if I can't remember if that was ever actually done and approved, and if that's the plan. But we need to involve things like that at every single school, because that's all it takes is one propped open door, one door that doesn't work. And then, you know, as far as metal detectors and whatnot, I don't know how you handle that. You know, when you have hundreds of kids coming in all at one time on a bus ramp, that you end up looking like an airport security line. So I don't know. It's something that needs to be explored. But and I'm glad Jack Reynolds was here tonight, because I think he made a point that of all the things that I've seen out there in social media and whatnot, that said the first responders are not necessarily you guys, because you may not always be there. even in high schools where you may be there, you may be at the other end. You're not the first responder. Somebody who is unarmed sitting there is the first responder. And those odds aren't good. And I think that all this talk about arming teachers, I think some of the stuff I see on social media with all the memes and, the teachers are asked to do this, now you want to arm us. Well, nobody's going to force anybody to be armed. And as I think about all this stuff, I think of my own classroom last year, okay? Because, I sat there for a year and I did that job. And I certainly wouldn't want a weapon sitting in a drawer or anything like that, because I know kids went through my drawers all the time. So just things to consider, how do you lock them, fingerprint type things, how reliable is that if you ever need it? And again, nobody's talking about having teachers, 100 teachers walking around a school. So when some survey goes out, when we get around to that, we need to make sure that we allow people, cut the hysteria about it and make it, make it real. It's like, this is the way things might look. Again, we just need to make sure to do that so that we get proper responses. We kind of have to take the fear out of it. It's unfortunate that we're having this discussion. But in reality, when you label something as a gun-free zone, this is often what happens. So, the other thing is the Safety Advisory Committee that you're talking about. Who actually is on that, or can you say?
Okay, so right now we have a couple that will chair that committee. The Dunlaps, Russell and Dr. Debbie Dunlap. Mr. Dunlap is a retired police officer. Dr. Dunlap is a retired educator, so I think we get the best of both worlds there. And then from that point, that's about as far as we've gotten so far. We started putting this together in less than a week, and so we're working on grabbing the right community members and deciding what's best for that committee.
Has there been any thought of including a board member or two on that committee?
To this point, there hasn't been any thought past getting the meeting with the Dunlaps and kind of laying out the expectations and getting a vision for where we want to go, and then deciding how they're going to invite community members. I don't know that I'm going to have a role in inviting community members. I want this to be their committee, and they surround themselves with who they think is best, and then I'll give them information.
Well, I don't know about how anybody else feels, but I think since we're kind of the ones ultimately responsible, I think there should be some representation. So
I recommend you, Mr. Rosenthal.
I'll be happy to. Just one other thing that I just jotted down. It's just something to think about. But when you said that the see something, say something. Well, it didn't necessarily work in Florida because people saw a lot over and over and over and over. And the government failed those kids all the way from the top. So that's nice that we have that slogan, but in reality, when it really matters, again, like somebody said, nobody can predict how somebody's going to react. And so that's great, but we need to make sure that when somebody sees something that it gets acted upon. So, and I appreciate Corey coming out tonight to speak as well. It is good to hear from our students. So,
I would like to address the card access points that you talked about. That was part of the 2014 bond. All the exterior doors on the buildings are either getting or have gotten card access points, as well as some of the interior points. But you're exactly right. If somebody props the door open or pushes the door open, like we heard earlier for an adult, then that kind of defeats the whole purpose of that. But I will tell you that part of our safety audit that we do is an intruder assessment. And we do that unannounced. And we send folks over there that work for us that the campus wouldn't know. And we try to find ways into the building. And that is part of the audit, because we want to make sure that if anybody else was doing that, they wouldn't be able to get in either. And to your point about talking to the staff, about securing those doors. The emergency management liaisons were told that today, and I'm speaking to all the principals tomorrow, and that is one of the topics that we're going to talk about why it is so important to make sure those doors are secured, and when they're not, then they need to be monitored by an adult. So thank you for that.
Right, and I guess, you know, this is something that we'll hear about, I'm sure, in the future, but so we have these electronic doors. Is there some kind of central monitoring system on those that shows, you know, when a door's open, like in the front office or something like that? Can we see that, or is that something? Okay. Okay, good. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Mr. George.
Yeah, I just wanted to couple of things. And first of all, sir, greatly appreciate your effort and your officers. And I happen to talk to many of them, and you all. I'm very proud of your department, your leadership, and the job you're doing. And when I talk to you guys, you know, I feel much better about this issue. And obviously, as you know, this is an emotional issue at the moment all over our country, and everybody have an opinion. You know, some people feel this way or that way. Like somebody said before, there is no one answer for any of this stuff, and I agree with my fellow board members on numerous things we are talking about. And one thing I'm greatly appreciative of, you are talking about educating our students and staff in the campus. And last thing I just wanted to say is that in 2014, I came on board. Immediately after there was this bond program we were talking about, we did talk about having a vestibule security or access, controlled access to the front office. And I really don't know still why we don't have in every one of our schools, because when I go to some schools, I see that I could go and engage the front office staff in a conversation. Somebody could walk right by me, and there are numerous schools we have that situation. And you mentioned about adding more officers or somebody in that kind of schools, and I think we should do that. And I really don't know why there is a delay in after 4 years later we still don't have that done. I really don't know, and I like to know.
So the security vestibules are just like every other construction project, with 80 facilities. They were broken down into phases. And so the ones that you see where there's no security vestibules right now are in phase 3. And I believe those are coming to you tonight, as a matter of fact, some of those bid packages. So we don't, while the summer is not very far away in the grand scheme of things, we don't want to wait until the summer to have them finished. So we're working on trying to expedite those security vestibules, especially at the elementary schools where we don't have police officers and we don't have the other added security features. So we want to make sure we get those taken care of as quickly as possible and show the parents that we're doing what we can to keep their kids as safe, as secure as possible. So those 15 campuses are the ones that we're waiting on to finish out the security vestibule project.
Okay, thank you, and I look forward to listening to your suggestions in April or May or whenever you're going to bring up, and I look forward to learning more about it, and I appreciate your effort on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. Mrs. James.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan, and thank you, Chief Ryder, for being here tonight and talking with us about this this important topic. In the last week or 10 days or so, I've talked to a lot of parents who felt anxious about their kids' schools for a variety of reasons, and I was glad to be able to tell them about some of the things you mentioned tonight, the window film we've put in, the security vestibules that we're putting in, the access control, so that to the best of our ability we're upgrading, I guess, our campuses to be to that next level of safety. So thanks for that, and I would encourage you to continue to, even though those things are your everyday, be sure that the community really understands that, because even today I talked to a lady who really was surprised. She didn't know that we lock the doors so people can't just walk in the cafeteria or just walk in a back door from the parking lot or something like that. So just a thought. Getting chuckles down there. I don't know why.
It was at me.
Oh, okay. You mentioned about our safety audit. Mr. Rice brought it up, and you talked about that. And you said, I think you said as part of that, you do some walkthroughs through the campus. Could you tell us what you do with the types of things you find and what you do with that information when you find it?
I can do my best. Judy
Well,
Lefevers.
just give me a couple
Sure.
of examples.
Sure.
Is
Yeah,
what I'm
Judy
going for.
Lefevers is our emergency management coordinator, and she's responsible for conducting all the safety audits at all the campuses. She has found a more efficient way. She came in, and between the 2014, for the 2014 time that we had to submit those audit reports, she was using a paper reporting tool, and it was extremely cumbersome. Since that time, she's developed an electronic format. We put it on an iPad. It makes it very simple. When you click on it, it gives you a red that something's wrong or a green that something's right, and very quickly you can see the percentage of things that need to be fixed. Judy will, after we do the intruder assessment, Judy will go back to the school and schedule a safety audit with the administration, and they will walk the campus, and they'll look at external safety features, they'll look at internal safety features, they'll check classroom doors to make sure they're locked. There's probably about 50 or 60 different items that they look for in the safety audit. And then they sit down and they have a conversation about what was found and what needs to be improved on and what they're doing well. And then we'll follow up with that. But those are the kind of things that she does. Now that we're prior to this reporting period, we were trying to get them all done in a very short time frame. But now that we've got a fresh 3 years to do them all, we've devised a plan to break all of our schools out into thirds, and then we schedule them accordingly. So it's much more manageable, it's much more efficient. I think we get a better quality product in the end too, because we're spending the right amount of time doing the safety audit, and we're able to sit down with the administration and really talk about it.
Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things you mentioned about locking the classroom doors, so that's something else that I was mentioning to this parent, and they didn't realize that was a protocol that we did now, and certainly that provides a level of safety if there is an intruder, if they even can get past the outside access, the safety vestibule, et cetera, then they still can't get into the classroom, presumably.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because what you just described is what we've tried to put in place in the last 8 years that I've been here, is concentric circles of protection, right? And so, again, not one solution is going to solve everything, but I've said before, safety is like a jigsaw puzzle, and so one piece doesn't give you the whole picture, and it's not going to make sense. But when you start putting the right pieces in the right place, then you begin to see what the safety and security looks like at that campus. And each puzzle is a little bit different, because each campus is a little bit different. So we have to be flexible in some regards. But when we put those into place, then we have layers of protection that give us that time to secure people if somebody does try to get in, and it gives us time to respond as well.
Okay, thank you. And then you also mentioned about video cameras and how we've increased the number of video cameras. So those images, are they available on a real-time basis at all if there was an intruder or an unknown person in the building?
Absolutely.
How is that available, and who's it available to?
They're available to the administration, they're available to the officers on the campus, and they're available to our dispatcher. We have a dispatcher that's staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Anytime we get intrusion alarms, things that are going on campus, dispatch immediately pulls up the cameras for that school, and they have a huge monitor that they can watch, and they can deliver real-time information to the officers that are responding. One of the other things that we've done that I didn't talk about here was a door numbering project several years ago, where we strategically number all the doors around the campus, and so the front side of the campus is always the A side, and so the left side is always the B, the back side is always the C, and the right side is always the D. So no matter which way the school is facing, whether it's north, south, east, or west, it doesn't matter. The front of the school is always A. So if an officer is responding and the dispatcher tells them that the intruder is close to C3, I know that's on the back side and it's the third door in. And so without even seeing the school, it doesn't matter what school it is, I know it's the third door in on the back side. That increases our response time to get to the place where we need to go very quickly. So that's something else that we incorporated several years ago that not every school district does. In fact, I don't know of another one that does it, but that doesn't mean anything.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And those, like, as Mr. Rice said, you have a lot of experience and a lot of expertise in this, and some of these things that have become second nature to you and your staff, we're very grateful for that, but parents don't necessarily know. So thank you for taking the time to share with us. I guess the last thing I want to bring up is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and I've gotten a few phone calls in the last week or so, and that's the situation over at Lakeview. I don't know what you can tell me about if the security cameras have been installed there or not. I know the administration at this point has kind of recommended that we not go forward with the security vestibule. And so I guess I'd just like to know what your plans are for Lakeview and what you'd see in the next few months, but even for next school year.
Absolutely. Right off the top of my head, I don't know where the cameras are. I don't know if you have that while you're. So I don't know where the cameras are right now with Lakeview, but I will tell you that Lakeview is one of the schools that we plan to put a uniformed security officer as soon as we get that contract in place, and I'm hoping that we can do that very quickly, like tomorrow. I've already spoken to the Lakeview principal, and they're very excited about having an extra set of eyes on the campus. And then we're also going to look at other safety measures, security measures that we can put in place at Lakeview. We know that there might be some renovations there and things like that. So setting the vestibule aside for right now, they're going to get a vestibule at some point. It may not be right this minute, but they're going to get one. So we're going to take other steps to secure that school as best we can and to put personnel there and give them the attention that they need.
Okay, and I heard you talking about training in general, and perhaps because of the layout of the school, it's kind of a long building. There's no core circle.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about concentric circle. There is no core really there. So I guess whatever attention you can give that situation, or your emergency management person can do that, because I think the staff feels a little bit vulnerable.
Mm.
And so I appreciate your attention to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Ms. Helliger.
Thank you. Ditto to what everyone else has said. Thank you again for being here. I guess just one other question. Mr. Rosenthal talked about how there was a lot of failure with so many different levels in Florida. And we talked about training of our teachers and our staff and whatnot. But can you talk a little bit about training of our officers to make sure that they're ready to perform the continuous improvement, the continuous training that we continue to do with our officers around that? Because that was one of the things that came out of Florida, was that there was an officer there that did not perform his duties. So can you talk to us about that a little bit? Absolutely. And I don't know what training Florida has in place for active shooters. It might be similar to what we have, but I can tell you that in 1999, after Columbine, there was an officer at Columbine. I'm just going to give you a quick history. There was a lesson at an officer at Columbine that engaged those students in the parking lot, but also did not follow them in. And in Texas, we said we can never let that happen here. So very soon after that, the Alert Training Center was developed through Texas School Safety Center. And Alert is an acronym for Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training. So very quickly, in about 2000, so for the last 18 years, every officer in Texas has been trained
to immediately go in and engage an active shooter. The reason is we know that shots are being fired and people are being hurt, and so we need to stop that as quickly as possible. In Columbine, they stopped and they called for SWAT team, which is what they were trained to do. But 8 SWAT teams showed up, and then they all had to talk about who was going in where, and 40 minutes later, they finally went into the school. We can't do that. So we train every one of our Fort Bend ISD police officers in active shooter, and we have every year that I've been here. In fact, since I've been here, Alert has now come out with an Alert Level 2 training. So Alert Level 1 are police officers that form a group, whether it's 2, 3, or 4 officers. We form a group that protects us, but goes into the building with what we have and what we carry in our cars. We don't wait for SWAT team, and we go to the sound of gunfire, and we stop the threat. That's what we're trained to do. But you have to train to do that because your natural instinct is to stop and retreat. For most people, it's to run the other way. So you have to train yourself out of that, and we train and do that every single summer. So Alert Level 1 is that. Alert Level 2 incorporates the medical component. So once you stop the threat, now you start helping victims from a police officer standpoint because EMS is not in there yet. And so we carry things like tourniquets on us and gauze, things like that that'll help victims while we're in the building as we're waiting on emergency personnel to get in. Every single summer, our officers train on Alert Level 1, and then the next summer they train on 2. And then the next summer we go back to 1, and then we go to 2. And we alternate those every year so that every officer gets both of those trainings within a year and a half or 2 years that they're employed here. Seemed like there was something else I was going to say about that training. It's, the other thing is we believe in that training so much, we sent 2 of our officers to the Alert Training Center to make them instructors. And so there are other agencies around here, Sugar Land and Missouri City and the Sheriff's Department, that also have Alert instructors. And so if the Alert instructors from San Marcos can't come down and train, we have enough agencies in the area that have instructors that we can help train each other. And I think that's a valuable asset to our county. And the other training that we do that I think is very important is mental health officer training. That is a 40-hour training class. And when I was with Austin ISD Police, we trained every officer in the department in mental health officer certification. And then when I got here, we did the exact same thing here. And every officer we hire, we put them through a 40-hour mental health officer training class. What that does is it allows them to recognize students who are in mental health crisis or staff members. And we are able to then get them the appropriate help and give them the attention that they need so that they don't revert to violence. And I can tell you that since we started in 2014 doing that, we started tracking those numbers. And Fort Bend ISD Police alone respond to about 35 to 40 mental health calls every semester. And so those are the type of things that we're putting in place that help our students, helps our staff members, that keeps them from progressing to a violent state, I think. But then if somebody does, and it's just like we said, we can't prevent everything, but if somebody does, I'm 100% confident that every one of our officers is ready to respond and would do so without even thinking about it.
Excellent. That's good to know. And thank you for letting me know the type of training that we have. I think I didn't understand. So hopefully you all, everyone here, kind of got a insight into that type of training that we are ready to perform our duties. And so if we're going to bring in security, security services to assist us, will they be trained as well in the alert training?
So they do their own training, but they will be trained in our policies and our procedures, our emergency reference guide, the standard response protocols. We want to make sure they understand the terminology when they're on our campus. But the other thing that I've offered to that security company is their security officers don't get the amount of training that we get, but they want it. We do a lot of in-house training. And so I have already offered that whatever training we put on during the summer, the folks that work on our campuses are more than welcome to come to our training. We want them to have that knowledge. We want them to have that understanding. We want them to have that confidence in being able to carry out their duties, because while they're on our campuses, they're representing Fort Bend ISD to our students and our staff and our parents. And I want them to react to those folks just like I would expect our officers to react to them.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger. Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mrs. Tasson. Chief Ryder, I appreciated your comments earlier that this is kind of a multi-layered effort. And I think that you're right. And I want to talk about an effort that, unfortunately, I don't think you can do much about. And that's with regards to mental health. And Mr. Carrion referenced that in his comments during public session, and he's exactly right. I've heard Judge Ed Emmett from Harris County, I've heard Sheriff Troy Nels from Fort Bend County, and both of those gentlemen understand and realize they're running the largest mental health institutions in their respective county. It's the county jail. Sad but true. A lot of people are moving to Texas. We don't have a state income tax. We have low taxes, but Texas is a low tax and a low service state. And so when we're talking about all of these things, I hope that we all take a moment to realize that our society has produced this issue that we are dealing with now. I'm not sure if the answer is arming everyone, so we're all packing heat. I'm going to leave that in your hands. I'm going to take that recommendation from you. But we need to keep in mind the fact that mental health is an issue. We can't ignore it, as was done in Florida. I'm not going to blame the people there. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. I also want to talk about all of this stuff comes with a cost. We had a $28 million shortfall in 2010. And I'm going to stop. I'm not going to get on my soapbox tonight about school finance because I promised to make this a short homily. I promise to be brief, no matter how long it takes. And what did we do then? Well, I'll tell you one thing we did. Every counselor in our elementary schools was turned into a proctor. They proctored exams, and they didn't have time to provide any counseling to our elementary school kids. Now, fortunately, we rectified that situation after Dr. Dupree had been here about a year, and we were fortunate enough to have several good years of back-to-back property growth. And we hired paraprofessionals to proctor exams so we could let the counselors do the job that they were trained to do and work with our kids. And that's one way that we can prevent these things from happening, is working with our kids, providing them the assistance and the help that they need so they can learn how to exist in a very complicated world that we have. I was at a conference over the weekend, and one thing you may be interested in knowing, Mr. Bassett, is that they're already predicting a $7 billion shortfall in the next legislative session. They might cut public ed. I'm not sure, but we might need to anticipate that. So when we're talking about hiring marshals and we're talking about all these extra things, it's one thing to pass a bond, which I don't know if we'll be able to pass one next year if the governor has his way on his restrictions on bond passing, because that's paid for with INS, debt service tax money. Building a school is the cheapest thing that we can do. Staffing that school with teachers and librarians and nurses and counselors for the next 50 years is the most expensive thing that we can do. So when we're talking about all of these additional solutions, I want everybody to know that it's going to cost money. And you're going to have to pay the freight or we're not going to be able to do it. I want every citizen in this Fort Bend ISD political subdivision to understand that. And I'm happy to give anybody who wants it a lesson in school finance. So I will close, Chief, by again thanking you and commending you for your efforts to keep our children safe, which is in everyone's mind right now. Thank you.
Mr. Burdine.
Okay, excuse me, I'll keep this very brief. I agree with everything that was said up here with my fellow board members. So I spent a few hours today. I'm a board member for the Texas School Safety Center, and I will make a little update here in a little bit, but I wanted to commend our police department. I sat in a room with people from all over the state of Texas, and some of the simplest of things that people can do to protect their district aren't even on their radar. And we are miles and miles and miles ahead of so many districts and so many large districts that it's just really sickening, really. Things like the lockdown procedure, alert training, things of that sort. And so it's really encouraging for me to see how far ahead we are. And I know we have room to grow, but I will get into detail on that a little bit later. But thanks for all your hard work. And it's encouraging. I think this is an opportunity for us to show other districts as well what a model looks like and what some of the best practices are in regards to school safety. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. Mr. Rosenthal.
One quick follow-up. Actually, it ties nicely with what Mr. Rice just said, because I've gotten a lot of comments over the past week from people who would be happy to volunteer to help keep our schools safe. A lot of those people are either ex-police, ex-sheriffs, ex-military. They would be more than happy to do that for free. Of course, we would absolutely, we must require them to go through all that training. So there would be some cost to us, okay, including the psychological training. We don't want to put anybody on those schools that could snap, okay? Let's be clear about that. I think we would agree. But that could also be another solution, just to think about, because there are people out there. I know there are people out there. So, and it is, don't you put in, your folks put in about 80 hours a year? Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. 80
Okay.
hours a year. We quadruple the minimum number of training hours required by our licensing agency.
Right. So it's very impressive. It really is. And I, I feel confident in you and your staff, but then again, you just, nobody can predict how somebody's going to react. So, we all need to just keep that in mind. And I agree with Mr. Rice that, we get a lot of suggestions about doing this and doing this and doing this, but nobody wants to really pay for it, So, I guess it depends on how much society really cares on protecting its children in our schools, because there's a lot of talk, but when it comes down to it, I've had people tell me that they don't see the need that we even have a police force. That's like, I wish it were the case, but I think we've heard tonight, and I think we've seen that, unfortunately, I do think there's a need, and I think you guys are doing an excellent job. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. So I waited till last, and I'll be brief, but I've heard the same thing before, and I was actually going to bring that up as well, is that I am very proud that Fort Bend ISD has a police force, and not just that we have a police force, but have, in my opinion, the best around. I don't know if Florida had a police force. I haven't heard them speak about that at all, and it sounds like that they didn't, or they don't, and so, I want to say that I think we're a step ahead of the game just because of that. We have a police force that's recognized as being one of the best in the state, that's trained and ready to serve our students and is ready to rush in when there are shots being fired. And so as I was listening to what happened a couple of weeks ago in Florida, and as a parent and as a board member, felt a lot of distress and a lot of pressure and a lot of anxiety about it, I could rest easy knowing that you guys are there and are in charge and are protecting our kids. So I want to start by saying that. One of the main reasons I wanted to put this on the agenda this evening is because, like Mr. George said, when I first got on the board, we had this conversation. This is not the first time we have had this conversation, and I want to make sure that the community knows that. This board has had this conversation before. We've had it with you. We've had it with Dr. Dupree. These things have been presented to us. We've talked about active shooter situations when we had the safety and security plan. All of us sitting up here asked questions about how we can go about protecting our kids, and you provided many of the answers very similar to the ones you've provided us this evening. And so that was years ago. And so I do think that we have done a good job in working towards getting our campuses safe, making our campuses safer, and making sure that we are protecting our kids. So I want to say that at the outset. Like Mr. Rice and Mr. Rosenthal said, the thing that disturbs me is the mental health piece of it and the social media piece of it, because it's very hard to keep up with the social media. And I know that we have had threats in our district after that shooting, and we have responded to them very swiftly. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank Sheriff Nels and the other law enforcement in our community for doing that. My kids' schools were involved in that. And so as a parent and as a board member, I appreciate the swift response to that. But tackling the social media aspect is very, very difficult. And tackling the mental health piece of it is very, very difficult. So one of the things when you put your committee together, we decide how we're going to do that. I'd like for there to be consideration in how we can use our collaborative communities piece to help us with the mental health aspect. I'm very glad to hear that we have some protocols in place and that you guys are doing some things. But like Mr. Rice said, our counselors need to be able to respond to these things, and then we need to be able to get help from our community organizations that are experts in this area to help us combat that piece of it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. The other thing I wanted to say is we have the See Something, Say Something that completely and utterly failed in Florida. And so I don't know if we do, or even if you can share publicly whether we do, but I would like to make sure that we have protocols around that, what is actually going to be done with that information, what steps are going to be taken, and how are we going to prevent the complete breakdown that happened in Florida, because many things were said to local law enforcement, to the FBI, and to others, and we saw that nothing was done. So I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Well, I have an answer.
Okay.
So I went back and looked. In the same time, Sandy Hook happened 6 years ago, and in the exact same time frame of Sandy Hook, we had 3 terroristic threats that we followed up on in our department. In the same time frame after this one, we've had 25. Those are social media posts where somebody's name is not their real name, and who knows where that post originated from. But years ago, we put in a digital forensics lab in our school district police department. It's expensive to start. It's time consuming, but we see the efforts, we see the fruits of that labor now, and we have had, but especially now, because we get a social media post, and I think the See Something, Say Something campaign is working, because we started getting people that were speaking up and saying, I just saw this post and it has DHS on it, and I'm scared to go to Dulles because that's the only DHS we have. And then as we responded immediately to that and started looking back and tracking that and working with our partners in the federal agencies, which we have great working relationships with, we were able to track that back to another high school in another district. And they've since made an arrest on that student. The same thing happened with a BHS post, and everybody automatically assumed it was Bush, and it ended up being a school out of New Mexico. And so we use the tools that we have to immediately respond to those. And when they are our schools, we take those very seriously. And within hours, most of the time, we're knocking on a door. And we have that post in hand, and we're asking them, tell me about this. And we have put people in jail in the last week and a half for making threats to our schools. And we will continue to do that if they continue to make threats to our schools. And we will follow up on every single one of them.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And that, yeah, that's makes me feel a lot better knowing that you guys have that in place as well. The other piece of it, of what happened in Florida that concerned me around protocols, were the student knew, of course, which doors were going to be unlocked at dismissal, knew how to get in, knew everything would go on lockdown, then knew he could flip the fire alarm and everything would be unlocked so that the kids could get out. So I just want to make sure that as we're considering those types of things, you know, how are we going to prevent that type of scenario?
Well, I don't know that you can prevent it, but what we do is we train to, when we say lockdown, that everybody needs to immediately go into a lockdown, or they need to get into a secure area. Or if you hear shots on one side of the building and you're on the other side, then run and get out of there, and we'll come find you later, you know, to make sure that you're okay. But we incorporate all that. There's no one plan that's going to work for every scenario, because as we talk about in our training, if there's an active shooter in the building, there's a more immediate threat for the folks around them than for the folks who aren't. Mm-hmm. And so just because this action is good for them, it doesn't mean it's good for them. And so it's very difficult to train everybody in a school to understand that. And so what we do is we give them the 4 basic words, but then we incorporate the run, hide, fight for the age appropriateness, right? And so that's how we deal with it. And so we have to trust that if somebody hears shots, that it's not just the principal that can call a lockdown, it's any staff member can call a lockdown. And so giving them the authority and the responsibility and the okay to do that helps save lives. And while Parkland was a tragedy and 17 lives were lost, it could have been a lot worse had they not called the lockdown and gotten people back into classrooms.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I just also want to say that I share Mrs. James, her comments about Lakeview. We want to make sure that Lakeview's taken care of. That's on our agenda tonight. It gave me a little bit of heartburn to think about delaying that vestibule. I understand why we're doing it, and we just want to make sure that everybody on that campus feels safe and like they're ready should the need arise. The training piece of it, I don't know if we can do this by contract, but if we're going to have security guards on our campuses, I would like us to require that training instead of just offering it. Just as you guys are negotiating, I wanted to throw that out there. I think it would be better to say, hey, if you're going to be on our campuses, this is our standard, and we'd like for you to meet it.
We can set that.
And then last of all, I'll just agree with Mr. Rice's last comments about school finance, and we take a lot of not just heat, but direct attack quite a bit about how we spend our money. And I think, as you could hear in Mr. Rice's voice, it's offensive because we are very frugal, I think, certainly fiscally responsible in how we spend our funds. And these are the kind of things that are needed. And so the first thing we're going to be accused of if something happens is not being prepared, while at the same time being attacked for not spending money on the things people think we ought to spend money on, who have no idea what we really are going through here at the district level, and the kind of decisions that we have to make. So it's very easy to sit on high and criticize, but these things do cost money. Our children's, students, and staff safety are a top priority. And yes, while we're going to be facing a shortfall, these are going to be the kinds of decisions that we're faced with. Since 86% of our budget goes to salaries and benefits, it makes it very hard to to take what little is left and spread it pretty thin. So thank you for all the efforts that you've made in putting into this. And can you talk to him after, just so we can, it's 8:30. Yes, very quickly, Mr. Rosenthal.
Okay. Just to reiterate kind of what you said, I'm glad you brought up social media. I'm going to make this real quick. I didn't even know that you guys did that, monitor all that social media. So if we didn't have a Fort Bend ISD police force, who would do that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you, Chief. Is this going to be short? Okay, this is a quick item, so we're going to finish it before we go back. The emergency declaration purchase update. Mr. Perez.
Yes, ma'am, and we literally have only 2 changes from last month, and they were necessary because both of these contractors actually are doing Bond 2014 work. We needed to separate the work that they did for us for Harvey, and the reason that we did that was we didn't want to introduce another contractor into the mix, so we asked them to do the work. We've now separated this money out. And so all of the dollars that are coming forth now, these changes are all within the original budget that we brought, at the onset, which at this point we're still $431,995 under. So these little adjustments we're making are not changing the, going above this. It's all within this amount, but they're necessary as we go ahead and go through the invoices, make sure everything's clear, and then we finalize a contract and issue a PO.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Perez. We appreciate that update. Did the trustees have any questions on that? All right, great. We are going to convene in closed session under the Texas Open Meetings Act, Chapter 551, and the sections listed in the agenda, and for the purpose of a private consultation with the board's attorney on any or all subjects or matters authorized by law. We are now convening closed session.